think it all happens in Silicon Valley. You thought wrong.
So BinaryPlex was set up with the mission of basically addressing how do you locate and find expertise. That's kind of where we've always started from. People-centric search is what we've always been about. And we've now developed a product called Tribalytic, which is what we're actually going to market with, which is basically around making social market research focused on Twitter much more simple. When I started with Alex, my co-founder, we initially thought about this idea of expertise location inside large companies, and large companies have this big problem that they can't find people. They know they've got experts, but they don't know who they are. So we started a product called HiveMind, and we had some beta customers signed up with that, and it was effectively this engine that knew how to mine content and identify and locate people. But as we got closer to the market, we realized that it wasn't something we really wanted to be doing. We didn't really want to do enterprise sales. Enterprise customers were already pushing back and saying, well, it has to run on Windows or it has to use this database. And, you know, as a small startup, we just couldn't afford to tackle those kinds of problems and have those kinds of constraints. So we decided to take a step back from it and take that engine and do something interesting with it. So we applied it to Twitter and created Twendly, which is the product that you're talking about. And that was basically saying, well, we've got this engine which knows how to find and identify people based on what they talk about. What happens if we index Twitter with it? And what happened with that was that I think we got up to about 600,000 Twitter users that we're indexing, and we had, sort of anywhere up to 8 to 10,000 Twitter users a day coming to Twendly to search and locate. Well, that's like peak search, but that we would actually find using it. That was only after a few weeks. So we said, you know, there's really something here. This is definitely something people want to do. And actually, if you go back to Twendly, it was basically this little bit here. It just found people and listed them and their description. That was it. But it was enough for people to want to use it. And we sort of took that idea then, we took it out to some angels and VCs, and we got some pretty harsh feedback, which was that it was really a feature and not a product. No one was really excited about it here in Australia, and so we sort of said, well, what do we have to do to take what we still think is a really exciting idea and turn it into something that's useful for businesses, and which is basically where the money is going to come from. And the answer to that was, well, we need to add analytics into it. It needs to be, location is one thing that a lot of people are asking about. It needs to deal with, the ways of finding and identifying and finding people and classifying and breaking them down and sorting them much quicker, which is really then how we got to Tribalytic. Basically, I guess it's worth understanding that we actually think there's a different market segment here from what other people are tackling. Most of the tools on the market at the moment are really very PR focused. They're around public relations, and it's really critical in that space that you actually capture everything that everyone says, because you don't want to miss that one tweet that's going to turn into a lawsuit or be a Domino's pizza case online, or whatever it is. You want to make sure that you're across it. But we think that there's a different market, which is really around market research and actually providing quantifiable statistical ROI on conversations. The problem is if you start mixing that across networks, you get into what I call a currency exchange problem. So how do you, let's say someone was talking about Qantas. How do you take a blog post about Qantas that mentions the word Qantas 3 times versus 100 tweets that mention the word Qantas once? And how do you actually analyze those in a meaningful, statistically valid way? You can't do that. It's a currency exchange problem. Now, you can monitor them, and most monitoring tools have this issue anyway, because you get like a little blip for blogs and then big blips for Twitter. So we said we're just going to focus on Twitter because it's the most open data. And the way to think about what Tribalytic is doing is to basically treat it as it's like having a panel of 150,000 users that you're listening to at any time. And at any time you can basically go and ask it a question, which is, what are these 150,000 people saying about this? And because we do Twitter and because we monitor everyone, we can ask any question we like. We don't have to actually set up a bunch of keywords. We're listening to all of those conversations all the time. And that leads to other really interesting things for us, which is kind of where we're going in the next release that we've got coming, which is that we can do things like tell you that at that given time, 50% of the conversations of people in Australia was around MasterChef, for example. So for the MasterChef final on Twitter, because we're not just monitoring the #MasterChef tag, we're monitoring everything everyone's saying. We can actually go back and analyse and say, for the hour that MasterChef ran, what was that conversation on Twitter? And then we can start to provide you some real hard metrics around Twitter that you just can't get from any other tool, because no other tool is listening to everything, which is basically what we're trying to do. At the moment, it's definitely focused at companies. We're not a consumer play. You know, the way we're priced at the moment, sort of the entry-level account's $100, give or take, a month. That's not really a consumer-type oriented tool. So we've either dealing with consultants who are working on behalf of a larger company, so sort of an outsourcer of an outsourcer almost, or people that have marketing agencies that have large corporate accounts that they're dealing with. So, and a couple of direct corporate customers as well. So we're still so we have a few customers, we have some paying customers now, but we're really still kind of just trying to work out what the right niche is in there and where we want to position ourselves best. Well, I think the MasterChef one is actually one of the really interesting ones. Some of the other stuff that we're doing is looking at TV ratings, for example, and how people are talking about TV shows and doing sort of almost a TV monitoring, like an OzTAM type rating, but around Twitter conversation on television shows. Because we monitor these 150,000 users, we're able to start to pull out some really interesting type statistics, and then actually measure how those users use Twitter over time. And that's kind of where we're going. We want to bring a lot of that stuff up into the front end of this tool. So, for example, in Australia, it's, let me see, it works about 20%. It's probably about a 20% drop on the weekend of Twitter conversations. So it's definitely all focused during the week. That's when people talk on Twitter. People get engaged around things like politics. So with the election spill, that caused a massive spike in Twitter conversations. And we can do that because we're just monitoring very broadly and start to see these kinds of trends and what's happening. And we think that adds value to people that are trying to engage and target consumers, because if you understand how consumers are using the tool and when they're active with it and what they're doing and how they engage and what gets them excited, then you can start to bring your campaign and tie it in with the behaviours that you're actually seeing. It's a really good question, and I've thought a lot about this. I think it's excellent. I mean, I love the Melbourne tech community. We're no San Francisco, right? And I've been to San Fran a few times, and I was there recently, and that has a real vibrancy about it. But it's kind of here in Melbourne too. You can definitely tap into that. Yeah, maybe it is a lot smaller, and you're bumping into the same people again and again, but the people that are here are really passionate about their startups, and there are some fantastic startups in Melbourne doing some really interesting things. I'm completely biased, and I have lived in Sydney before, so I can qualify this statement. So I'm completely biased and think it's much more interesting down here in Melbourne than it is in Sydney, and people doing much more interesting things. Sorry, Sydney guys, but hey, Melbourne rules.
Think it all happens in Silicon Valley? You thought wrong.